Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Kalina from Business Review, and I will be your host today. It is our pleasure to have St Lucia and Spears with us today, and to welcome all panelists for this webinar titled Investment Migration 2021, COVID-19, Cyprus, and the Future of Citizenship by Investment. I would like to welcome you to our webinar platform on 24. You will notice that this webinar is browser-based, so if you disconnect for any reason, please just click on the link that you received via email to rejoin the session. In order to ask questions, you can send them in via the questions widget. Just type them into the box at the top corner of your screen and please click submit. We will allocate some time at the end of the session to address any questions or thoughts that you may have. Please use the yellow help widget if you require any assistance, and you can move, resize, and maximize any of the windows in front of you to get a better view of the slides. But now, please allow me to welcome Alec Marsh, Editor-at-Large at Spears. Alec, over to you now.
Hello and welcome everyone to this very special Spears webinar brought to you in association with St Lucia Citizenship by Investment. The topic under discussion today is Investment Migration 2021, COVID-19, Cyprus, and the future of citizenship by investment. Providing the insight, I'm delighted to welcome the four, which is Nesta Alfred, the CEO of St Lucia's Citizenship by Investment Programme, one of the youngest programmes in the region, and I know he'll be taking the opportunity to talk about that further during this discussion. Next, we have Paddy Bloor, Director of Henley & Partners UK, one of the leading providers of investment migration services. Then we have two leading private client lawyers from London, Keris Gardner, Name Partner and Head of Charities and Immigration at Morris Turner Gardner. And finally, I'm delighted to say we have James Cornby, Partner and Head of Private Wealth at Stevenson Harwood. Now, thank you to everyone for joining us today. Just a reminder, as Kalina has said, that you can ask questions through the portal, and we will turn to these at the conclusion of our discussion when we have our Q&A in about half an hour or so. So, to our first topic, 2020 will go down in history as the year of COVID-19. We can only hope that the coronavirus story comes to some sort of conclusion in 2021. But the question for us today is, what impact is this pandemic having on the investment migration of the world's UHNWs? Paddy Bloor of Henley & Partners, perhaps given you guys operate in numerous jurisdictions around the world, you would be a good person to start with to provide a summary of the sort of behaviours and decisions we've been seeing amongst the international super wealthy as a result of COVID. Paddy, are you there? Here as the first gremlin of the call. Okay. Nesta, are you there? Could you tell us what you're seeing from St Lucia?
Great, Alec. Thank you very much, and let me say good day to all our viewers, and welcome. Alec, I think this is a very important question or discussion to have. And before I can speak about the impact on the migration sector, maybe I can give the many viewers an appreciation of how this pandemic has or can impact on this Caribbean region in such a profound way. So please permit me this. First, let me start off by saying this has been the most destabilizing event since World War II for this region. It has affected every aspect of life. The region, as you know, is well known for its vibrancy and its color, but even this is now being compromised. But there are some unique features that we must speak about and must be presented so that we can fully understand the impact of this pandemic on this Caribbean small island states. To start off, this is the most highly indebted region. Its debt to GDP ratio is in excess of 70%. More than half of this region's GDP is centered within the tourism sector. In fact, it is among the world's most tourism dependent. Then there is the classification of this region as middle income countries. And this has a negative impact on this region's capacity to borrow for soft loans or grants from multilateral countries or financial institutions such as the IMF or the World Bank. And the need for reclassification is even more apparent with this pandemic. And then finally, I want to bring on board the whole climate change and how this has impacted the region in a very profound way. We see more extended periods of droughts, and of course the hurricane season is more active than it has ever been before. So in general, what I've done is to present you with the main issues that we have been confronted with, and which of course impact in a very strong way in the way forward for this region. But I'm happy to say that despite this gloom and doom, when one speaks about the migration sector and also the citizenship by investment program in this region, there is a positive story to be told. In fact, the region or those islands within the OECS who are involved with this program have seen increased numbers, sometimes increases of about over 100% in the number of applications that are being submitted. And in the case of St. Lucia, I'm happy to say that our numbers from March up until now has been on a steady increase. And of course, this speaks volume because it does as well show that this country can continue to having a steady flow of foreign direct income through this program. So, Paddy, this is my take.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nestor. That's great. So I think Paddy Blue of Henley & Partners is back online. So, Paddy, if I can turn to you, what's the kind of the global picture that your company's seen of the way high net worths internationally have responded to the pandemic?
Look, I think what we've seen a massive growth of engagement across the world. I'm sure everyone's aware we've got offices from Canada in the west to Hong Kong in the east, London in the north to Cape Town in the south. And we've seen a massive growth of engagement, at least 50% at the smallest growth and over 300% at the largest area. And it's because investment migration, when it comes to it, it's about two things. One is about risk management. It's about hedging volatility and understanding that where you are might create challenges for you on a personal level, but also fundamentally on a wealth management level, on the value of your portfolio. Second thing is, can you create more value by creating opportunity? So can you capture value by making an investment, becoming a citizen or a resident somewhere else, building alternative structures? Can you create new value and can you create lifelong yield? And I think our clients, our potential clients, have become more and more aware of this dynamic, and COVID has crystallized it in that it's the first major global volatility event since the 08-09 crash. 08-09, I was working in Kazakhstan, and I saw the cranes stop and the queues start outside Kazkommerts and Halyk Bank because there were runs on the banks and there was no money left. It was dramatic, and that was the first stones of the avalanche of a major volatility event. This is different because this is about public health. This is about people dying in tragic ways, but that has created a similar movement to what the investment migration industry saw in 08-09, which is an understanding that the globally wealthy are very aware of the effects of volatility and that this is what has driven them to come and engage with people like Henley & Partners.
Thank you. So up to 300% increase in inquiries is what you said there, which is...
Indeed, yes, in certain places
which is astonishing, isn't it?
Where I think it's fair to say that there has been the initial breakthrough and understanding in creating the value in that market where previously it hadn't been there. And COVID has been the catalyst to really crystallize that value equation in the minds of high net worths.
Okay, brilliant. Well, I'll turn to the first of our London private client lawyers, Keris Gardner. What immigration inquiries has COVID driven to your desk, please? And by the way, for our listeners, Keris is dialing in, so you won't see her.
Yes, I'm sorry about that, everyone, but welcome and thank you very much for listening in. In my case, listening rather than seeing. The area that we're seeing most effect, shall we say, from COVID is, bizarrely, of all the reasons that I never thought would be one of the reasons for increasing questions about mobility amongst the internationally wealthy, was healthcare. And I am finding that more and more people are putting that very much towards the top of their list when it comes to looking whether they would consider it to move, but when they do consider to move, where they would move. And one of the weird things is that because I think people have felt so stuck where they are, that is the only word for it really, unable to move around the world as they would normally do. I think they felt that this must not be allowed to happen to us. We really need to have extra mobility. We need to have the extra facility that perhaps a second passport or perhaps some other location might give us. So what I'm seeing is that they're looking for clients. That is, are looking for obviously greater mobility, as we've said, but where can we go? What type of jurisdiction are we looking at? And islands seem to be extremely popular because they seem to have fared pretty well in many cases in relation to COVID. So that indeed has come towards the top of people's thinking, which I never thought I would say before. Healthcare, medical facilities, who's dealt with the pandemic best, and indeed, therefore, how do we get access to those jurisdictions if we're stuck with a passport that doesn't really give us much visa-free travel anywhere? So that's what I'm seeing.
Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to James Cornby then. How's COVID affected your in respect of migration, James?
I think one of the interesting trends in terms of clients is the disenfranchisement of the office. We noticed it ourselves as professionals in that I'm sitting here in my London apartment rather than in the office. And I think in terms of clients that are still generating wealth, they're learning to work and interact with their staff more remotely. So I thought it was very telling, actually, that I can't remember which island it was, but one of them was offering special work visas for people that want to work from home. So I think we've seen the disenfranchisement of the office making clients rethink about where they need to be. Because, prior to COVID, if you're a hedge fund manager, you needed to be in Mayfair. God knows why. But that's why. We're moving away from that location-based wealth generation to wherever you happen to be. That leads on to Keris's point that, well, if I'm going to be working from home, then where am I going to be? Previously, clients saying if they're going to migrate, they want to go somewhere interesting, so they'd rather go to a big city with lots of connections. Now we're seeing more of a assessment of quality of life. And Keris is quite right that islands are suddenly attractive for the first time because they're not so heavily impacted. I hesitate to suggest, though, that perhaps when COVID is over, people will find islands boring again. But that's maybe people will have got used to them by then. But so COVID is causing people to rethink where they generate their wealth. And of course, if you are mobile and you're able to move the wealth generation to somewhere with a higher quality of life and lower taxes, then that's a double whammy. And it's an excellent reason to move. So lots of people are thinking about it. On the stats, by the way, because Alec, I know you love stats. The applications to Guernsey and Jersey, which some Brits moved to, has gone up by more than 100% as well. Now, actually, they only take on a vanishingly small number of people each year, but that just shows you that I think even people that you think would never move from the UK are actually considering it too. So it's all change.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. That brings us, I think, quite nicely to our first poll question, which should be appearing on the screen for everyone listening in. And the question is, do you expect that future tax rises required to meet the costs of fighting the pandemic will drive increased investment migration of high net worths? And there are 4 answers to choose from there. Now, while you answer that question, we'll then move on to the next question, which is, what trends do we think will emerge from the pandemic? Now, I think we've already actually covered some of that, but I'll quickly go back to you again, Paddy, to just finish up on anything you think will be a runner out of this.
What we found really interesting around the pandemic is we've had growth from the what you'd call the classical investment migration, high net worth liquidity pools, whether that's China, whether that's Southeast Asia, whether that's the Middle Eastern trading, cities. But what we have also seen is we've seen growth in previously low volume markets where, as I say, Henley and Partners and our peers have been looking to market and make a breakthrough for a number of years, but COVID has really driven it. So I think West and East Africa have had COVID as the catalyst for that really to be a breakthrough. We saw it at the back end of last year, and now it's really continued its momentum, in part exactly for the reasons that Keris and James were talking about, in terms of it's looking for optionality, and COVID is just that global moment which really focuses the mind for high net worths thinking about themselves and their family. But the one that's been perhaps most surprising has been the United States and the UK. Again, you're talking about global volatility. You're talking about a certain amount of concern about the United States' ability to institutionally manage a global healthcare epidemic. And we've seen US citizens come to us in unforeseen numbers where they've said, look, we've been looking at this for some time. This isn't a sudden panic. This is a realization that now is the right time. And so it's gone from being a trickle to being a flow now. And and unlike much of the rest of the world where it comes to investment migration, where it can be anyone that has just about got enough capital that they've scraped together to invest in a program, or it can be someone for whom $1 million is a rounding error. The United States tends to be of much higher wealth. The clients tend to be much higher wealth, and they're looking at options in a way that they haven't been before.
Brilliant. That's a good point to bring in Nesta on trends that you think will be running after this. Nesta, have you seen lots of interest from the United States, or are there other long trends you think will sustain out of this? Nesta, I can't hear you. We lost you. Have you perhaps
yes, sorry about that.
That's right.
I think I'm back on now. I was saying that some of the trends that Paddy spoke about are some of the trends that we are seeing here in the region and that I can refer to as well. To start off, I think we are going to continue seeing increases in numbers of applications, even post this pandemic. But one of the trends that we are seeing, and which is very interesting, is that we are seeing increased applications from non-traditional jurisdictions, i.e. United States of America, London, and even Europe to an extent. In fact, we've seen increases in numbers as high as 71% coming out of the United States, and some small increases from London. But surely what we're also seeing is the traffic flow on our website is really directed from the US and parts of Europe. But I think Chris did make mention of this whole being stuck. And I think what this pandemic has shown the world is that persons are now reviewing to a great extent their ability to move and to move easily when this does happen again in the future. So international mobility will be a very important topic for every single person, for every single family. And I think this COVID-19 has really set the tone, even in a more profound way, in regard to the whole concept of international mobility.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nestor. So looking at the response to the poll, it looks like overwhelmingly people think that increased taxes will drive investment migration amongst high net worths. I don't know if you guys have got any additional comment to make on that, but we could turn, as we've done rather well on that topic, to our next topic, which is Cyprus. So over the summer, the government of Cyprus decided to suspend its citizenship by investment programme after a sting by the broadcaster Al Jazeera. Now, I think it's fair to say that this affair sort of asked questions of the industry, and we'll now ask a second question before we go to the panel. So on the screen, you should see the second poll question, which is, does the suspension of the Cypriot citizenship by investment programme bring the investment migration industry into disrepute? So while you're answering that, we'll turn to the discussion. I'll start with you, Paddy, if I may. Could you briefly summarise what's happened in Cyprus and what impact you see it's having on other programmes within the EU? Do you think others might be wound up, for example?
I think the answer is others wound up is no. I think the Commission took a position on a legally tenuous basis to placate some European Parliament stakeholders and wider stakeholders, and it's been very clear that Malta is going to assert its sovereign right to decide who it makes citizens and who it allows to be permanent residents. I think Cyprus will and should audit, review, reform before it considers anything else. But at the same time, I think the sovereign and societal value created by citizenship by investment is vital for a sovereign state like Cyprus, especially given the geopolitical challenges in the Eastern Mediterranean. They're not going to be drilling for gas anytime soon. So without tourism, they need a way to inject liquidity and drive growth in their economy. And so, look, I'm a citizenship by investment advisory guy. I'm not going to pretend that it's a wonderful thing that's happened, but at the same time, I think also, interestingly enough, I'm an ex-Forex trader, and there have been scandals throughout the Forex and the LIBOR market for the last 30 years. But there's never any suggestion that it's existential. It's always a case of there is an individual that has done something wrong. They should be punished. There should be an investigation into the system, and it should be made sure that there are no systemic errors, and away you go. Because fundamentally, when it comes to it, the industry creates undoubted value that can't be replaced easily. Therefore, make it safer. Audit, reform, and away you go.
Okay, brilliant. James Cornby, is it go too far to ask if the shockwaves of the Cypriot scandal, if that's not too big a word, have been felt in your in-tray?
I don't think anyone's particularly shocked about anything that happens in Cyprus, to be honest with you. I think it also needs to be put into perspective that Cyprus has political issues with the EU. Other jurisdictions which offer citizenship or residency by investment don't, if they're not in the EU. Of course, it's a very topical subject at the moment, given that the UK is about to crash out by the look of it. So I think Cyprus is not as totemic as you think. And I always believe that ultimately capitalism will sort things out. That's why we have migration, essentially, that particularly when it's tax or regulatory driven, is that you want to find the place which is most suitable for you. And there's always competition. There are nearly 200 countries in the world. Now, many of them you won't want to live in. I'm sure if Somalia started an investment by migration route, we probably wouldn't be clamouring to get in. But there is plenty of competition. So Cyprus going down, that's interesting. That's bad luck for Cyprus, bad luck for people wanting to move there. But it doesn't really change what we do as professionals.
That's brilliant, thank you. So, I mean, the listeners think that marginally it's not been brought the industry into disrepute, it's not a big deal, therefore. So, Keris, as our other London expert, I mean, how important would you say the suspension of the Cypriot scheme is generally to HNW migration?
Well, I rather agree with what James said, because we're not really seeing any impact from it. No one has really sort of expressed even surprise, to be honest. What I would think is that it's going to put, or we're going to see more pressure on Malta, not so much to wind up necessarily, but to improve on its system for granting citizenship by investment. As far as I'm concerned, and I think it will grow as a result of both Brexit and the pandemic, that clients will still want these schemes, still be looking for these schemes, and that the countries involved, the jurisdictions involved, will still need that kind of investment, probably even, well, definitely even more so post the pandemic. So I think that, yes, it is bad luck, as James said, for Cyprus. It's a shame it happened, but I don't think it should necessarily bring the whole of the migration industry into disrepute, no.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that's a good upbeat message. So over to you now, Nesta. As a provider of citizenship by investment services, what's your takeaway from the Cypriot story?
Look, I think I would agree with James and Ceres in regard to the fact that what has happened in Cyprus will not impact in any way on the region, and more so in regard to golden visas or citizenship by investment programs, as we now call it in the region. At least it has not shown this. But I think we have to be mindful that some of the language that is being used by the EU must be looked at very seriously. And I think the language such as whether those programs are sustainable, whether those programs have the ability to undertake enhanced due diligence, those types of language is very important and must be fully understood and taken somewhere in your back pocket. But I think for St Lucia, I think what transpired in Cyprus clearly showed us that we are on the right track. The right track when it...
Apologies, Nestor. This is Kalina speaking. We cannot hear you. Can you please try refreshing your connection?
Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, I think on the basis that I can't hear Nesta, and I don't think anyone can hear him, Nesta, we will move on until you've got back, and we'll move to the next question, and then we'll come back to this question of probity at the end that I think you were quite rightly moving on to in the context of that topic. So our third topic is geopolitics, and geopolitics, I think most of us agree, in the rise of populism has been a boring refrain in the last months and years. whether it's state actors such as China clamping down at Hong Kong or being more bellicose regionally, or if it's in the US or Brexit even, depending on your persuasion. Geopolitics is a fact of life. And I'm interested to know from the panel the degree to which they think it is driving migration by high net worths. So, Paddy, the line is good with you, so I'll start with you on this one. Is geopolitics increasingly becoming a thing that pushes people around the world?
Yeah, it is. Although it does obviously depend on how you want to define geopolitics. But for instance, we saw a massive increase in engagement last year when it became very clear to high net worth, ultra high net worth, that Hong Kong's special status within the People's Republic of China was going to be reviewed. We see similar issues in the volatility inherent, in the Trump presidency, that it has made US ultra high net worths want to have optionality. And we see it across the world. And it's not just geopolitical, it's environmental as well. We are seeing our first clients come to us who are concerned that in 20 years' time, their family homes will be underwater or desert. And so we see a multiplicity of risks which drive our clients to us, geopolitics being one of them. And I think the main thing I say is geopolitics doesn't have to be a battalion of T-72s coming to destroy your village. It doesn't have to be Nagorno-Karabakh. It can be wider and longer term and more structural, as was the case in Hong Kong. But yes, undoubtedly, geopolitical risk is a major driver of high net worths looking for optionality. Not necessarily, and this is something I think everyone needs to understand, is our clients don't come to us looking to leave. This isn't like my grandparents leaving Southwest Island as impoverished farmers in 1949, never to go back. This is something where our clients have businesses, assets, where they are. They intend to keep those, but they're looking for global optionality. And often geopolitics means that you want as much optionality as possible. So yeah, we're seeing significant growth.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So, Keris, does geopolitics come up across your table and your caseload in London?
Yes, very much so, particularly given what's going on in Hong Kong at the moment. There's a lot of interest in terms of how the Hong Kong population can take advantage of the ability to come to the UK. I don't know whether anyone's mentioned this already, but just out of a matter of interest, and knowing that you love facts, as someone said earlier, we've seen very few investor visas issued for people coming to the UK of late. But in this Q3 of this year, the figures went up from 23 in Q2 to 102. And interestingly, 23 were from China, 20 from Hong Kong. So clearly, geopolitics is having an effect in that region, if nowhere else, it seems to me, because those are quite stark figures, and we haven't seen that sort of movement before. After all, why would you have wanted to move from Hong Kong, particularly in the past, until the latest repressions? So yeah, it definitely crops up, and it's becoming probably, I would say, worse, not better, over the last several years, in the sense that there are so many countries where people just find it impossible to carry on living. And even if they don't want to move completely from that country for the time being, for all the reasons that have just been said, they are looking for that flexibility. In other words, if push comes to shove and everything does go completely and utterly wrong, we need to be able to get out of here. And where can we go? What have we got to give us this flexibility? And that's where the mobility and these citizenship by investment programs, residence by investment programs come in handy, and people are looking at it more and more with a geopolitical, from a geopolitical viewpoint in terms of what's happening elsewhere in the world.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, James Cornby, I'm going to guess you agree with Keris's analysis, but do you agree with her in what you're seeing, and how does it compare to other push factors, say, economic reasons for people to move around?
Totally agree with Keris on this, that we're going to see, I think, a huge influx of Hong Kong people to the UK, which is to our benefit, and I'm very happy to see them arrive. I think we'll see more migration. Now, geopolitics, tax comes into geopolitics because tax is now used as a weapon by the EU in its sanctions regime that's bringing in as part of the blacklisting process. So tax is now political. And we've seen, you've probably seen the same reports as me, Alex, that a bunch of do-gooder economists and other people have got together to suggest that the answer to everything is just to impose a wealth tax, I think, for 4 or 5 years, and then everything's going to be great. Well, that's fantastic if you don't have the amount of wealth required to be taxed. But if you do, then there'll be a huge flood, and it will make the other factors pushing people to migrate look puny. If we just look at the facts for the UK, which is quite interesting, and I looked at these recently because there's been some talk of doubling CGT rates. CGT actually only brings in 5% of our tax revenues in the UK, and the top 1% of people, by the way, only about 200,000 people paid any CGT, but the top 1% of those paid nearly 40% of all CGT. And when it comes to income tax and NIC, the top 1% have now hit 30% of all revenues raised. So if governments feel that as a consequence of the pandemic, we need to squeeze the rich until their pips squeak, then I think we'll find huge droves of people leaving. And it wasn't that long ago, back in the 1970s, when I'm happy to say I was a very small infant, people routinely left the UK in order to avoid high income taxes. So I think tax is political, and it will cause political issues, and it will cause people to migrate. And the reaction of governments to this pandemic, do they go high tax, high spend, or do they go for low tax and trying to resuscitate economies by attracting trade? That's what the argument in the Brexit talks is all about at the moment. The EU does want to control our marketplace after we leave. So it's all politics, tax, and it's going to get very interesting in 2021.
Thank you for that, James. That's very interesting. So, Nesta, I'm going to try you and hope that you're back. Are you seeing geopolitics being a factor in people coming to you and making inquiries with you in St Lucia?
I think I would agree with all of the other members of the panel that geopolitics can be a trigger and can be a very important trigger for migration. But when I speak about geopolitics, if I can focus more on the foreign policies of governments and more on the economies of countries, that in itself can be a great driver. So when I first got my very first application, the very first application that came from the United States of America, really shocked me. And I tried to figure out why would a country like United States of America, why would a citizen of the US even think of wanting to become a citizen of St. Lucia? But then as I delved more into the application and tried to understand what was driving that applicant to do this, it was because that applicant had a level of concern about his financial security in the United States, given the present administration of the United States. Then the other applications that followed through, the rationales were very varied. Persons were concerned about the foreign policies of the respective governments. There were concerns about taxation and whether moving their head offices or moving their companies or some of the income out of the United States or out of countries where it was highly taxed to a region like the Caribbean would be a trigger
Nesta, I think we've lost you again on the line there. So perhaps you could refresh your browser, maybe if that worked last time. And I think we'll have to move to the next question, unless if you want to give it a quick refresh. Okay, well, I think whilst that's happening, we'll turn to Brexit. Obviously, heaps has been talked about this topic, and it still does. But I think it'd be important to have a quick update on how this is affecting ultra high net worth migration. Nesta, you back?
Yes, I'm so sorry. I don't think you heard anything that I may have said.
Well, we got we got most of the first half, I think.
Okay. So would you want me to start off all over again, or be okay to move on?
Well, I just jump in about halfway through. I kind of jumped in about 30 seconds after you went quiet, if that helps.
Okay. All right. Well, I think my conclusion was that we have seen examples of geopolitical issues being a trigger for some of the applications that we have received, especially from the United States of America. So I just wanted to say that geopolitics is one of those factors that will play a very important role in regard to migration and in regard to persons seeking second citizenship.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, in that case, we'll quickly turn to the subject of Brexit. Paddy Blur of Henley Partners, is the world's most famous divorce occasioning a stampede of UHNWs from the United Kingdom?
I wouldn't say it's a stampede, but we've seen more than double the Brits come to us than we would normally. Unfortunately, the people coming to us don't have benefits of Irish parents like me. So they are looking for optionality. So yeah, undoubtedly, we have seen more British high net worth individuals come to us looking for ways to guarantee constant access to the European Union, whether that's purely travel or whether that is residence or the combination of both.
Okay, thank you, James Cornby. Is this something you've dealt with? You've helped a lot of people become Irish citizens.
No, I haven't actually. What I have had is a lot of European clients leaving the UK to go back home.
Yeah.
Whether that's Brexit generated or not, I don't know. But a lot of European people have gone back to where they came from. I suspect what will happen also is, we know that our immigration system is going to change. And at the, prior to Brexit, if you had a European passport, you can come in. And after the 1st of January, there'll be a points-based system, which is going to mean we have a wider range of people coming in. So, previously it might be 90% of people coming in would be European citizens, and it's going to be a much wider range of people, which I think is going to be interesting for all of us as advisors and gives us opportunities. So Brexit's going to be extremely interesting, and how it shakes out people coming in and leaving. And I can't wait to see what happens by the end of this year, to see what kind of trading relationship we've got left with the EU. Because, of course, the economic factors are hugely important as well, in that, is the UK going to be an economic wasteland after Brexit and pandemics had its way with us, or are we going to be the new Singapore on Thames? So who knows? Can't wait.
Hey, brilliant, thank you. Now, Keris, over to you. I mean, what's the impact, the Brexit impact that you're seeing in terms of super wealthy either coming to UK or leaving?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very mixed bag. You're so right to cover both toings and froings. What's happening in my practice is that, as James said, quite a few Europeans are going back home, and that's definitely been a theme of late. On the other hand, they could be only going temporarily to see how the land lies, because, of course, if they've got their act together in the UK before they go, then they can still come back to the UK if they've got themselves sorted under the European Union settled status regime we have here. They've got until the end of December, by the way, to not much longer to get themselves sorted if European nationals haven't yet done so. Irish citizenship, yes. Immediately that the decision was made that we were going to leave, I got inundated with some inquiries about people who thought they might have the right to Irish citizenship, and some did, some didn't. The interesting thing, though, really is the number of people still coming here for me, because as James said, I think it will be a big opportunity, no matter what the immigration system is going to end up looking like. European Union nationals will be treated as currently, someone coming from the USA or Africa. They'll have to submit themselves to the same immigration system. So that will be more difficult for them potentially, but the government is trying to open that up a little bit, particularly for skilled workers, for example, to come here. So it is a really mixed bag. A lot of my wealthy clients are looking for access to obviously the European Union, but also perhaps less onerous to do the access to the Schengen area. So Portugal has become very popular. Greece might well start coming up in the ranks. I don't know. But certainly Portugal and Italy have been very popular for different reasons. But that's happening there too.
Thank you very much. Now, Nesta, hopefully you're back with us. In terms of you mentioned earlier there's even been an increase in applications from London to St Lucia. To what degree do you think these are Brexit related? Nesta, I don't know if you heard that question, but I wondered if there's a Brexit impact in what you're seeing in St Lucia.
No, I don't think we've seen any of that impact on our program or even in St Lucia at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll turn to sort of a last question before we move to questions from our virtual floor. And it's thinking about the 2020s and trends that we can see. Obviously, we've talked about a few already, but if I can ask the panel to pick one or two trends at most each, leaving everyone an opportunity to pick the most important one. Perhaps we could sort of zero in and collate what we've talked about during the course of the last 45 minutes. So, Nesta, if you're there, of the trends we've talked about, or ones that haven't yet come up, what do you think is going to be sticky and stick around with us as we go into the mid-2020s in terms of investment migration? Okay. Ness, did you hear my question?
I'm so sorry, Alec, but I'm somehow having some severe challenges on my end. Would it be kind enough to repeat this question?
Well, yes, certainly. So it's just, we've talked a lot about trends during the course of the last 45 minutes. So the question of what's the most important trend that you observe going into the 2020s in terms of investment migration? What's the biggest of the most important of these trends?
I think the whole concept of persons being able to move when they would like to is a big thing when you think about migration, and more so the Citizenship by Investment program, and the whole idea of being stuck by itself is an idea that now persons are exploring. And therefore, the issue of mobility, international mobility, is not being discussed among families, among persons. And therefore, I believe that trend will continue. Whether that trend is going to be directed more to the Caribbean is a matter that we need to look at. But I think what is important is that outside of the migration business or the Citizenship by Investment program, the Caribbean region, and more so the smaller islands, are well known for its tourism. And therefore, I believe that in time we would see exactly whether that trend of increased numbers that we're seeing now will be sustainable as we move along post COVID-19.
Brilliant, thank you. So a desire for just a bedrock desire for international mobility. James, what is the big sticky trend you think will be with us for the next couple of years?
Well, I think that tax is going to drive politics, and politics is going to drive migration. When we look at global economic trends, for most countries it took 7, 8, 9 years to get over the global financial crisis. The UK has borrowed way more in 9 months than it had during the global financial crisis. So I think the shock waves of the increased government spending will affect every country. Every country will adapt its taxation rules. And we know that tax hurts people's pockets. And if their pockets are being hurt, they will look for places to move. It's natural human behaviour. And so that is a trend that I think will continue and get more complicated over the next 2 to 5 years as countries seek to repay their debt. And that's what it's all going to be about. And that's why clients are coming to see me. I've even got clients seeing me now because they're worried about the stuff they've been reading in The Guardian about wealth taxes coming in. And I'm telling them to hold on a minute. We've never had a wealth tax in this country. And I don't think the Conservative government would bring one in as much as they might be tempted to. But that just shows you that people are anticipating tax rises already and anticipating making a move. And if those tax rises do actually crystallise, I think we'll see a huge amount of mobility. And the comments I made earlier about wealth generators being able to do what they do from anywhere that they choose is an important factor in that. The ability of high net worths to move in the 1970s and 1980s is minuscule compared to the ability to move now and to still run your business. And that's a trend that's not going to reverse.
Brilliant. Thank you. Keris, briefly, if you may, thank you very much. What's the principal trend, do you think?
Well, I think it really is picking up from what Nesta and James have said. One is flexibility in mobility, the ability to travel around wherever you want to, and perhaps more importantly, in relation to the programs we're talking about, the clients need to be able to feel that they can move very quickly if they have to a safe haven. In other words, they can turn up in another country, and they can actually live there rather than just visit. So I think that's going to be a major theme. Tax impact, absolutely agree with James. Is that going to drive people away from the UK, for example, if the pressure becomes too much? And lastly, and I don't know whether this is relevant, but it's just one of the things I'm worried about, that will the pressure start mounting from wherever the pressure might come, that these programs might have to change to give a greater benefit to the wider economy of each of those countries, rather than, for example, in Portugal, where the property market has been the main benefactor. So those are my thoughts.
Brilliant, thank you. And then in a word, Paddy, if I could have your input on this one as well, about the big trend for the 2020s.
Enhanced standards. More security so that everyone is comfortable with it, but there's going to be constant growth because of the constant growth in global wealth and the constant demand for capital from sovereign states. So more and safer.
So you talk there enhanced standards. Is that in respect of the quality of the programs?
I think it's ensuring that every single investment migration program can guarantee that the potential investor isn't a major in the GRU or isn't someone from Hezbollah that you don't want to let into your country. If that can be demonstrated as at a very high standard, I think EU, OECD and wider stakeholders will be far more relaxed about it, and the sovereign states can then go on to raise more capital and drive more sovereign and societal benefit from these programs.
Okay, that's super. Thank you. Now, Nesta, to you then. James, Paddy's just alluded to it, but you were cut off earlier when you were talking about the Cypriot situation, and you were talking about the importance of standards as a provider. Would you just wrap up on that now?
Yes. Thank you very much for that opportunity again, Alec. Look, as I said earlier, that I think what has happened in Cyprus clearly underscores the efforts that St. Lucia has undertaken in regard to this program, and more so in regard to the whole concept of enhanced due diligence. And I think what I stated earlier on as well was that St. Lucia is very much focused on ensuring that enhanced due diligence is a cornerstone of its program. And that is done in several ways. In regard to, one, ensuring that we gather all of the intelligence information on those applicants, and that we hire a third-party due diligence firm to go out there and to get as much background information on those applicants is so very important. And therefore, having this high standard of due diligence, one, ensures that we protect the security of this region. Secondly, that we maintain the integrity of our passports, but also, more importantly, it ensures that the sustainability of this program is maintained.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We'll turn to some questions now, and if I could ask you to be brief because we're running out of time. But there's a first question is one for you, Nestor. Does St. Lucia have a plan to revise or improve upon tax incentives to go hand in hand with the CIP offer, and perhaps encourage residency or further investment in the country?
You know, St. Lucia is now looking at various issues. We are now looking at work from home visa, extended visa program for St. Lucia, for persons outside of St. Lucia, persons who may want to work remotely and come to St. Lucia because of the way in which we have been able to control this pandemic, our warm climate. So that extended visa program is now being looked at. St. Lucia does have a provision within its international business company legislation that allows for the movement of home offices into St. Lucia, or headquarters into St. Lucia. When one transfers the headquarters into St. Lucia, there are certain fiscal tax incentives that are provided. One of those is that if that head office employs 10 or more persons in St. Lucia, they don't necessarily have to be St. Lucians. They would be given a tax incentive in the sense that they would not be paying taxes on the salaries earned. Also, the head office, in transferring its assets, its machinery, etc., those will not be, there'll be no custom duties applied to those as well. And very importantly, as part of the program, and it's been managed by the CIP unit, is the alien non-holding regime. And that particular alien non-holding regime has been so enhanced in that if an alien, a non-citizen, purchased property in St. Lucia, one of the attractiveness of this is that one will be given what is called an investor entry permit. And that investor entry permit allows them to enter and remain in St. Lucia as long as they want. The issue of residency and creating a residency legislation, as you would know, that there's been a lot of issues from the OECD in regard to such legislative framework. And St. Lucia is now looking at that framework and trying to see whether it can address many of the issues that OECD has pinpointed, and hopefully come out with the residency legislation in the future.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, we've got 2 minutes left, so this is a question for everyone, but I'll start with James. Two things: which is the most useful passport in the world, and how many passports does a self-respecting UHNW need? As quickly as you can, James Cornby, please.
Well, I think if you're an international criminal, you need at least 12 passports, starting with a British passport and working downwards. But being a Brit, I'd say having a British passport, even if it's not most useful, is the best. You can't hear Alec now.
No. James, and how many passports does a UHNW need? Pardon me, I was on mute.
So I didn't. We're all laughing at the fact that you went mute. Was that the question? How many passports do you need, Alec?
More. I'm going to move on to Keris. What's the most useful passport in the world, Keris, and how many do your clients need, really?
Well, actually, the best person to ask that question of is Paddy, because I know they keep a list of, a hierarchy of passports. But I would agree with James that I still want to keep my British passport, whatever, come what may. I would, however, still like to have access to the EU, so I might have to try a Malta passport or move to Portugal for access through the Schengen visa regime. After that, you're looking at things like St Kitts and other countries like that, which offer well over 150 visa-free destinations. So those are all pretty much up there, I would say. But I think Paddy's probably got the answer, hasn't he?
Well, now to Paddy then, please.
St Lucia for travel, Malta or Austria for residence, British because I remain British, and Irish because no one's going to capture me and torture me because I'm an Irishman, but I've known people in certain parts of the world with British passports that get, unfortunately, selected. So I'd say those are your options.
Well, that is brilliantly comprehensive. So I'll give the last word on this one to Nesta. Which is the most useful passport in the world, Nesta?
Look, I think this is fluid, but I can safely say if one is looking for a place to retire, if one is looking for a less
Nestor, I can't believe it, but you've disappeared at a crucial moment during that, which... No, you're not coming back, are you, on that one, Nestor? So I think, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up on that one, Nestor. But I think, suffice it to say, we've got a good idea that you're recommending the St Lucia passport for its flexibility to take you to 144 countries and counting, and its long-term return investment. That brings us to the end of this Spear seminar held in association with the St Lucia Citizenship by Investment Programme. I'd like to thank the wonderful panel of experts we've had today. So Nesta Alfred from St Lucia, Paddy Blue of Henley & Partners, Keris Gardner of MGT, and James Cornby of Stevenson Harwood. Thank you to our attendees for tuning in. Thank you to our sponsor, Nesta Alfred and St Lucia CIP. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much. That's all from us. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder for the audience that your questions will be available to be answered at a later date. So that just leaves me to thank once again on my end to Nestor, Paddy, Keris, James, and to you, Alex, for this session, and to SIP St Lucia for sponsoring the session. To the attendees, you will receive an on-demand version of this webinar tomorrow, or you can access this through our website, which is www.business-review-webinars.com. We look forward to sharing further webinars with you, so please do keep an eye on the website just mentioned and follow us on Twitter at BR Webinars for daily updates. Also, you can join our LinkedIn group Business Review Webinars. Thank you everyone once again, and I hope that you have a great day.